Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. This is Watchbox Studios. You are watching Watches Tonight. Sean is on the switcher. Depending on what you saw in the thumbnail and the title, this show may turn out to be very different from what you expect. Nevertheless, I talk Scuba 50 Fathoms because, hey, everyone is. We offer an in-depth analysis of movement finish, which is what this episode's really about, and I share your wrist shots tonight while chatting live on Watches Tonight. Okay, if you enjoy this program, please follow me on Instagram where I am Tim_Mosso. All of the good stuff goes up there. 60-second snippets of the coolest watches we've got, many of which are not actually listed on our website. So check me out, Tim_Mosso on Instagram. Jump into the box. Arto Charles from New York City. Decilis 2, Enrique Cassiano from Brazil tonight. Mark S. from Brooklyn. We got Eddie Landsberg, Thomas Burnett, we got Miroslav joining in, Antelope, Robert Dixon from Scotland, 11 from Canada. We've got Jens from Frankfurt staying up late with us, John N., Doc Fink, Watch Out, Jim Millett, a good friend from the Facebook group. All right, guys, so let's remind everyone that this is an interactive show, live chat, but also sometimes you guys send me a few of yours for mine. Viewers shots number 1, Mark F. of Alberta, Canada, with a lovely sunflower shot of his Rolex Submariner in front of a late summer bloom. This one on a rubber B-strap, looking good. Marcio M. is in the Netherlands with his Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot Travel Time 7234G, looking good. I love these shots, guys. You're doing well. Nathaniel K. of Florida stuns with this rare rose gold and tantalum bezel. Gerald Genta Arena by Retro Sport. That is one of my favorite watches of all time. There's another one in white gold that I must own. John P. takes his Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph on the road with the family en route to Pikes Peak, and Max W. reports from Capri, Italy with his Patek Philippe Calatrava 6119G. We got Joshua joining in from Auckland, getting up early. We got Rich W. from NYX posting outside of a Swatch boutique. Very topical, very timely. Sean Hansen and Watch the Flow, who says he's been supporting me for the last 10 years, and for that I am deeply grateful. All right, Blancpain. No quartz watches ever, according to the brand fathers, but plenty of plastic lately. People have asked what I think about the new Blancpain Swatch Bioceramic Scuba 50 Fathoms. So here goes. In what's becoming an annual ritual, Swatch Group plucked the most recognizable watch from one of its tenant brands and reissued it as a Swatch watch in plastic. It was a huge deal last year. I think it even caught them unawares as the Swatch Omega Moonswatch collaboration became a blockbuster that debuted to endless lines and pre-owned markups on eBay, Etsy, and others as much as 1,000% of the retail price. Make no mistake, it was a phenomenon because in 2022 Switzerland, the whole country, exported 15.8 million watches, of which about 950,000 were just the Moonswatch. So for 2023, maybe predictably, we get a new collection of Blancpain-inspired divers with a unique color code set, straps, and dials to represent each of the world's named oceans. This is the Arctic model, and like the Antarctic, it features a no-date dial with a historic feature of vintage 50 Fathoms, either the NORAD or the moisture sensor, depending on whether you get the Arctic with the NORAD or the Antarctic with the moisture sensor. Now, there are also gradient fade dials on conventional 5015 style faces, so if you're familiar with the modern 50 Fathoms, that's what the other ones are like. We also have the Indian in green, we have the Pacific in orange like a school bus, and we have the Atlantic in blue. So, what can I say about these? Well, they all feature the System 51 mechanical, which I find a lot more agreeable than last year's quartz caliber. And because Blancpain likes to say there has never been a quartz Blancpain, it does sort of uphold that pseudo-boast. And I call it a pseudo-boast because they were bankrupt for most of the quartz crisis, so of course they didn't have a quartz watch. But these are desirable. And before I say anything critical, let me just be clear that this is a fun piece. It's innocent on its own terms. It's possibly the best gift that you can give this year to the watch collector in your life, because we know that it's both very expensive and very difficult to genuinely give a watch as a gift to someone who is a opinionated collector. You're almost always going to spend a lot of money and get it wrong. And also, frankly, it will bring some new people into the hobby, but not quite as many as last year's Moonswatch. It is water resistant to 300 meters, or a genuine 50 fathoms, so it's a lot more swimmable than last year's Moonswatch, making it a more suitable all-the-time watch, since after all, it is plastic. Plastic's fantastic, and it's very, very light. Each one has a winding rotor with a slug on the back, a regionally appropriate slug. That's the Indian Ocean. So yeah, the standard 50 gets fine finish. This one gets a slug. But that's cool because the price is right at $400. And for the record, I like the Indian Ocean model the best, and I have no objection to the basic premise of building a cheap plastic simulacrum of a luxury watch. This doesn't offend me the way it offends some purists. But I don't like this series as much as the Moonswatch, and I'm going to tell you why right now. First, the landscape for these releases has turned a little bit toxic. Last year, there was palpable excitement among both veterans and young people with no prior watch interest, and many onlookers saw this as a win for watches in general, given the infusion of fresh blood who would now get into the habit of wearing a watch. But it got ugly fast. David Breton has a good article today on a blog to watch about how he could have and should have sold his $250 Moonswatch for $3,000 when he had the chance. Now, plenty of people had the same idea this time, and this is why I'm saying the landscape's getting toxic. Thomas, one of our viewers from Munich, Germany, sent me this photo of young people, mostly in their 20s and teens, queued up at a Swatch store in Germany. He spoke to many of them while they waited. Almost to a man and woman, they were not fans of watches or even Swatch watches. The common goal was to get one of these for around €400 so you could flip it online like a sneaker for €1,000. And that was pretty much the motivating factor common amongst them all, which tells me that this whole plastic watch thing might have jumped the shark. Appropriate, since this time it's a diver. Okay, second, the Moonswatch was a tribute to one of many successful Omega product lines, the Speedmaster. Yes, that's probably the Omega to buy if you're just going to get one, but there are other strong lines. The Seamaster collection is big business for Omega globally, and the Constellation is a huge brand by itself in Asia. The 50 Fathoms, on the other hand, is the only meaningful line at Blancpain, the only one with relevance. From a volume and awareness standpoint, Blancpain is as much a prisoner of this dive watch as AP is a prisoner of various Royal Oak variants. But unlike AP, which is its neighbor in the Vallée du Joux, Blancpain is not in rude health and has suffered diminished interest and volume for years. Another 50 Fathoms variant, even a very accessible one that might spread awareness, doesn't really move the needle because Blancpain is not having trouble selling dive watches. What the company needs is people to believe in its dress watches, which are excellent, the way customers did in the 80s and the 90s when the brand was at its modern day peak, its modern era peak. A slick 2000s style 2100 series chronograph or a 1990s style triple calendar moon phase would be really cool, and it would have leveraged Swatch, the brand's reach, to promote Blancpain lines that sorely need the publicity and the volume. Okay, third, we're encroaching on real watch territory for $400 or €400, which is even more. Remember, last year the Moonswatch was $250, $260. Okay, fine. But at $400, the Swatch 50 is a watch with an irreparable movement, sealed for life. You can't service or repair this or extend its life in any way. It may be mechanical, but it is in its own way just as disposable as most quartz watches. Now, for comparison, a Seiko 5, this one with a nice late 60s, circa 1968 look, that's made of metal. It costs $415. It has a date, automatic winding, and a serviceable mechanical movement. In other words, while it's not luxury, it's definitely a long-term purchase that can be renewed again and again. It's not disposable. That's the SRPK 17, and it costs $450. A very reasonable way to spend your money, and if you wish, to give a gift that any watch collector would be happy to have. What else can I say? Well, it's 100 meters water resistant, which in all practical terms makes it as swimmable as this new 91 meter / 50 fathoms. The Swatch Group itself offers entry-level watches for nearly the Blancpain's price. Take a look at Tissot, where we have the C-Star 1000 Powermatic 80, another steel diver, 40.5 millimeters, unidirectional diving bezel, 80-hour power reserve, $750. You got a couple of different dial variants, so you do have choices, and it can be serviced for a lifetime at very reasonable prices. We want to spend a little bit more, but still under $1,000. Well, Mito, whose merits I have praised continuously on this show, gives you this wonderful looking Ocean Star Tribute red gradient for $990 with a lot of the same tech features on the Tissot, just with a higher overall grade of materials, fit, and finish. Again, we're still well under $1,000. Save a little bit more of your summer job money as a kid, and you could definitely buy this. It's also a great graduation watch option. Finally, Blancpain looks hypocritical for promoting its supposed ocean commitment to conservation while launching 1 million chunks of single-use plastics into the world. Sure, Swatch's straps on this new model are recycled ocean plastic nylon fishing nets, but big deal. The likelihood is that 100% of this watch will go in the trash once it stops working, and we know that overall only 9% of plastic globally is actually recycled. So this is just more flotsam and jetsam for those giant ocean gyres full of plastic. And I kind of regret that, given that Blancpain almost had me believing they cared about this conservation thing. In all likelihood, the recycled strap and the rest of the plastic bioceramic case is going to wind up floating around in one of these 5 named oceans. Now, I have no doubt that a plastic Breguet Type 20 is only months away. Surely this is going to happen. They might even call it the 20 by 20 or 20 times 20 and charge $400. See what I did there? Or they could go up market with this series and launch the Breguet Place Tourbillon, based on the Swatch DFN1 carousel tourbillon-ish thing. So that's definitely a possibility if you want to spend $4 grand on your plastic watch. I don't blame anyone who buys the new Scuba 50 Fathoms to wear for fun or give as a gift. Again, I really think it works great on those terms. But I do blame Swatch for letting Blancpain's other models rot on the vine. The brand was arguably stronger when they bought it from Jean-Claude Biver in 1992 than it is today after 31 years of supposed promotion and investment. Plus, they're teaching kids to be flippers and taking no real action to deal with all this downstream plastic detritus. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I like it, it's kind of cool, and I don't object to using the image of an expensive watch to sell a cheap one. But I liked the Moonswatch better, and I wish Blancpain had been a little bit bolder in choosing the model. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 2. Jeremy M. is at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum with his Rolex GMT Master 2 pilot's watch, a pilot's watch, and a P40E Warhawk. Max L. stuns with his beautifully preserved vintage Vacheron Constantin 6782 Thunderbird. Michael M. relaxes recursively with Omega in the foreground and my Debatoon DB25 QP review in the background. Plus some bamboo. Tim M., not this Tim M., but another. Rob and Kate, you've seen them all on our collector conversations, celebrate New Watch Day with Rolex Daytonas at Govberg, which is our sister company. Warren P. honors the X-15 hypersonic rocket aircraft with his Accutron astronaut in Dayton, Ohio. And indeed, several X-15 pilots did later earn astronaut's wings for their exploits. They went high enough. Stefan G. of Germany rolls with his Rolex GMT Master 2 root beer and BMW, keeping it all in the fatherland. Loving it. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your analog on my digital. DP saying recently purchased the new Blancpain Bathyscaphe complete calendar. 20% discount from AD, wanted a non-hype, non-cheap higher end watch. It is exquisite quality, nicer than my Rolex, Omega, Geo, and Cartier. In the watch finish segment I'm about to show you, I was going to put in the Movement 1315 from the 50 Fathoms, and the bevelings and snailing are gorgeous. I didn't have room ultimately. I mean, let's be honest, fine finish. It's not as cool as the Slug, right? But it's pretty good. And the 50 Fathoms definitely delivers on that front, the real 50 Fathoms. What else is going on? We got Key Killer saying $400 is pretty pricey for a Happy Meal watch. Mike K. Tim, please provide your thoughts on Fairer. I value your opinion. I will do that in the future. We got a lot to cover tonight. We have BNS saying, respectfully, Tim, I don't think a Swatch Blancpain Villeray would work. Well, sometimes you got to put in the effort. It took a lot of effort to turn Blancpain from $20,000 worth of copyrights in a box to a going entity. Jean-Claude Biver did it, and he did it without Swatch money. So with Swatch money, I think they could get some of those Blancpain dress watches to sell. Would it take more effort, more brain power? Sure, but that's why they earn the big bucks over at Swatch headquarters. Okay, we have Rich Warren saying, agree Jim, Blancpain is superior finishing over Rolex. Oh, it's not even close. Like something like a 1315 or a 13RO, it's not even close. Rolex watches are very accurate and tough, but they're not finished like Blancpain. Okay, luxury watch finish in depth. This is where we really get to talk about one of my favorite topics, and one that I don't really elaborate when I go on my 5, 6, 7 minute stream of consciousness reviews, because I can't really show you using the phone that I use for most of my reviews. So today I'm going to show you what I see when I use a 10 power loop. I've taken photos, I've documented it, I'm giving you opinions, including brutal opinions. Rest assured, you get nothing but truth from me. So today, Watches Tonight goes where no web show has gone before. In hopes of making my review comments on watch finish more accessible and relatable, I programmed a ton of slides and discussion to explain the scope and quality of movement finish on a variety of watches from a variety of brands. You're going to see what I see firsthand, 10 times magnification, and in some cases a little bit more. Let's start explaining something I've mentioned for years, which is that not all anglage is created the same. As a baseline, let's go full screen here. Here is an Omega Moonswatch, sapphire sandwich caliber 3861 from the current generation. Entirely mechanical bevel. You could see it is absolutely flat. And if you get really close, you can see the little lines, the bite marks left by the milling machine that created this. Nothing has been done to disguise that. And it's honest, given the price of the watch. That's fair. Although I will say the bevels on the old sapphire sandwich 1863 were more convincing. So, from there, let's take a look at a Moser caliber 800. Now you're looking at an $83,000 watch, and you can see that there are little burrs on the edge of the bevel. You can also see the bite marks. They're not as clear as on the Omega because it looks like there might have been at least one pass with a handheld drill bit with a fabric tip, a very basic handheld buffing tool. But you can see how the edges where the Côte de Genève end are very rough, and how the bevel itself is straight. If you were to basically put a level on that bevel, the bevel would contact the whole thing because there's no radius. A true filed and polished bevel is rounded, and this is completely flat. And let me be perfectly honest, that in order to deliver a perpetual calendar watch in a tantalum case with an enamel dial for under 100 grand, this kind of straight bevel with muted milling is necessary among many considerations. Also of note is the lack of any anglage. You can see there are several areas where recesses and tight components fit relatively close and flush to each other. And these are off to the side of the movement. And you can see how there's no attempt at a bevel here. These sides are completely sheer. From the tops to the side, it's a right angle. You can also see that the screw in this instance is black polished on its top, but it hasn't been slotted. The slot is vertical. There's no beveling or V-shaped profile leading into the base of the slot from the tops. This is all price appropriate for a mid-$80,000 complication. We'll return to screw slotting a little further down the line. Colobsidian saying, recently saw an FP Journe on Instagram. They had forgot to apply the anglage to a whole side of a bridge. You're going to see some FP Journe tonight, and I'm going to be very clear about why I am measured in my assessments of Journe, why I'm not totally in love, and you're going to see this the way I see it. And then we have Squid saying, I can't tell time. That's fine. Most of us don't wear our watches to tell time. And then we have Abdul saying, that's a bit rough. All right, let's talk a little bit more about this topic because it gets better from there. But we're going to take some steps back before we take some steps forward. Continuing with anglage, it's notable how some brands have improved dramatically as expectations have risen. I want to put my historically sober assessment of FP Journe watches into context by showing you a Ruthenium Series Annual Calendar 1300. So this is the automatic 5-day. This is from 2004. This is brass movement era. Now blow this up. I don't know how many of you are looking at this on a computer, but if you're looking at it on the phone, zoom in. Okay, easily observed are the bite marks from the milling wheel, and it's not even close. The milling marks are not nearly as cleaned up as they were on the Moser, and the surface is littered with burrs, divots, and even clag. This is very, very rustic. And you can see this was done entirely mechanically. Can we jump back 3 slides, Sean? With almost no work done to actually cover up the bite marks. And you can see how they've taken chunks out of the Côte de Genève and how they run all the way down the bevel with burrs in the middle of the bevel. Normally I'm used to seeing them on the edges. This has them all the way down as though the work wasn't done neatly and the bite marks don't actually overlap each other. So I want to emphasize that this quality has improved over time as Journe has introduced a second hand-finished polishing step on more modern watches. This gold movement was crafted just a few years after the brass piece that you saw, but the buffing has been introduced probably with a drill bit, again, just a little buffing bit at the end of a power tool, in order to bring the machined bevels to a mirrored shine. Now the bevels are still more or less straight. There's not a whole lot of curvature here, and it is obviously a 2-step process that starts mechanically, but it is a million times better on what you saw on some FP Journe watches previously. The blind spot on some Journe watches is what Abdul mentioned earlier in the chat box, which is that even today you do see some faces of some bridges that include no meaningful beveling by hand. So Journe watches, acceptable for the price, but not the high standard. Definitely not the 10 out of 10 on our scale. We'll take a look at stuff that is. So, for a true cost-no-object anglage, filed and finished manually, let's refer to the very first product from Romain Gauthier, the Prestige L Minute, or HM, from 2006. This was the very first product, and unlike FP Journe, the Gauthier stuff was just flawless from the first, or almost flawless. We'll catch some of the mistakes later on. Unlike the early Journes, the anglage here is world-class, so let's take a look at it. You could see where these pivots are ensconced in their jewels, that the bevel is rounded. So if you were to try to attach let's say a straight edge to one of these bevels, you wouldn't be able to put the straight edge over the entire surface because it has a radius. The straight edge would rock back and forth. So this is a rounded bevel, but it's also a mirrored bevel. The filing was performed manually to create an arc, and then it was hand finished, likely finished up with gentian wood in the final pass to create that mirrored shine. Those creases, well, we'll talk more about the creases in a moment, but let me just emphasize that the bridges have interior angles as well, and we're going to get a good look there, where the bevels come and they meet in an acute angle. And you can see how sharp that is. And right now, with the technology we have currently, that can still only be done manually. The bridges themselves are thicker, so that the bevels can be drawn back farther over their surface and have a nice long radius profile. And because Romain Gauthier is not a watchmaker, these details reflect the influence of his neighbor and watchmaking mentor Philippe Dufour. Gauthier lives in the Vallée du Jeu, only a short while from Philippe Dufour's atelier. And so because he was an engineer, Gauthier, coming into the watchmaking space, he didn't have a finishing ethic of his own, so he adopted the best of local tradition, guided by Dufour, which is why what you'll find on these Gauthier pieces, pre-C, pre-continuum, is the equal of what you'll find on Philippe Dufour, and very similar in style as well. This is about as good as it gets. At no point is someone with a milling wheel or a power tool finishing that bevel. That starts with a file and finishes probably with some sort of wood, a very soft wood. Okay, let's take a look at what you guys are saying in the box. DP, amazing stream, Tim, very informative and educational, great work. I thought this one would be very different, so I hope you guys enjoy it. We have Key Killer 74, will FP polish the burrs once serviced? No, refinishing a movement is not part of a service. What else is going on? Mike K saying, I will never buy an FP Journe. They eliminated the wait list of the Chronomètre Bleu. I was on the list for 2.5 years and was next in line to get one at the LA location. And then we have Andrew T saying, Tim, what's your opinion on Piaget's finishing? Altiplano Ultimate, some standard manual winder like the 430p. It's going to be much higher on the Altiplano Ultimate concept than on a 430p. A 430p is a movement you'll find in Cartiers. Nice, I would say Piaget for the most part is on par with the likes of Glasuta Original, Zenith, Audemars Piguet, and JLC. The super high-end Piaget stuff, that compares with Holy Trinity. So Piaget has echelons, and I think that goes by price, and that's pretty intuitive. I do think that it's important to recognize Piaget is a great manufacturer. We'll talk about them more later, along with Breguet, in another episode. Okay. So, another example of improvements over time can be found on Patek Philippe. So let's take a look at 1990s 5035 annual calendar. This is more, I would say, clean and resolved than the Journe, but you can still see the bite marks. They're very fine and right at the center of the circle if you look. They were polished over the mechanical finishing, but you can still see them. Now here's a current production 5326G travel time annual calendar. These are purely mirrored bevels and nicely rounded. While the process starts mechanically, I would argue no one does a better job than Patek Philippe of finishing up its bevels manually to look like the whole process was manual. And while they could be broader, a lot of that's just a function of the thickness of the bridges, which is fairly thin. These are very, very good. For contrast, let's take a look at a side-by-side of the 5326's machine beveled winding rotor, which is in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and then you could see the finger bridges that bear the drivetrain down to the escapement. You could see that the rotor has a purely mechanical bevel, and the bite marks are crystal clear. There wasn't even a pass done with a power tool. And then you could see that the bevels on the bridges are rounded and mirrored. You can see, however, that they took the easy way out. That inward curve at the center could have been an interior angle, and if this were a company that makes dozens rather than tens of thousands of watches a year, probably would have been an interior angle. Patek is doing a better job of rounding the bevels with its current production compared to this example from Journe, which is polished but fairly flat. Okay, Laurent Ferrier, which finishes its movements but does not manufacture movement parts in-house, has suffered in the market due to prejudice against its établissage business model. Now, I have no problem with this. If you specify and then procure the best made parts from the best supplier and make a meaningful contribution like finishing and regulation, to me, that's what Vacheron did for 250 years, and it was Holy Trinity. So look closer, and Ferrier makes a sufficient case on its own to want these watches, and even elect them over very fashionable pieces from the likes of Acrivia and FP Journe. That Ferrier finish is as good as what you saw in the Gaultier, but whereas Gaultier watches are pretty much rated for what they are, Ferrier watches are very underrated. Mile-wide bevels, sharp inward angles, even executed on steel. This one didn't capture as well, but that's the half bridge for the balance, which is skeletonized, black polished, and has 4 inner angles, and steel is very hard to finish. Black polished steel is on this bridge for the micro rotor, likely executed by rubbing against a zinc plate, lapping paper, or diamond paste. You can see that not only is it truly black polished, but it's also been micro beveled. Not easy on tiny parts, especially tiny parts like that spring that have very confined interior profiles. They're hard to reach internally. Ferrier Côte de Genève are particularly rich, broad, and luminous, and they're very, very wide, which I love to see. The best Côte de Genève you'll find on companies like, well, Moritz Grossman, not doing them in Switzerland, so they're stripes, not Côte de Genève, and Jean-Daniel Nicolas, which is Daniel Roth today. But this is about as good as it gets from a company that's making under 200 watches a year. And we also have small recesses. You could see there was that noted recess on the Moser from earlier off to the side of the watch where you could see that the bridges and the levers are not finished in any meaningful fashion. You go back to the small recesses on the Ferrier and they have been beautifully finished with attention to detail worthy of the finest in the industry. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 3. Derek W. searches for intelligent life and caffeine with his Rolex Milgauss Z Blue. Dane H. enjoys his Glasuta Original Senator chronometer. here with matching German car, BMW E90 M3 Competition. Jason C. and Savannah the Bulldog appreciate his Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter, James Bond 60th anniversary. Mohammed E. and Rolex they stay safely inside of the Jeep right here at Nairobi National Park in Kenya. Wouldn't want to meet that guy face to face. Very cool shot though. Kasim H reports from Dubai with a lovely shot of his latest steel platinum dark rhodium Rolex Yachtmaster. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list. Okay, Mike K saying, the Chronomet Bleu was my grail. I even talked with Jorn's brother. He didn't care. BNS is saying, Harry X saw from other vids the case can be opened to replace the movement. Whether or not Swatch will provide replacement, I don't know. If you're talking about replacing the movement in a Swatch, putting a 1315 from a 50 Fathoms in the plastic case, I would love to see that for the same reason I would love that one guy put a V8 in a Tesla Model S. You don't need to do it more than once, and it's kind of pointless, but it's weird and wonderful that someone thought to do it. Maybe if you could find like a 50 Fathoms that's been totaled and the movement's still working. I don't know. And then we have Abdul saying, I think Geo offers great value for the money for the finish. I really think they do. And it varies by model. Like some of those others I mentioned, there are echelons depending on the price. And then we have BM Tim, where does Grand Seiko fall in terms of finishing? I would put them on par with the likes of something like a Rolex or Omega, where the finishing might be designed, so to speak, to look attractive, but it's going to be mechanically added, unless you're looking at something made by the Micro Artist Studio, and you'll know when you are. If it's something like the new 9S calibers, like the 9S A5, those are finished like Rolex, very neatly and cleanly, but mechanically. What I will say about something like the 9S A5 is that the architecture, the size, shape, and orientation of the pieces relative to each other, it's a lot more attractive than the older 9S calibers. So they're thinking more about how Grand Seiko movements look, even if, for the price, they can't afford to hand finish them. Okay, luxury watch finish in depth continued. Lest we get giddy with the ridiculous executions I'm about to show you, it's important to remember that these are man-made works of art, and men and women are not perfect. Mistakes always happen even to the best. I don't consider them defects in the strictest sense, but each will have his own views on the acceptability of these imperfections. Look at the Mont Blanc enamel dial, white gold case, 58-piece, limited edition, 1858 vintage chronograph. It is a work of art, and that's the movement right there, made by Minerva, the high-end arm of Mont Blanc, making only a few hundred watches a year. A human hand holding a tool slipped at some point. Mont Blanc's elite Minerva division still makes mistakes. And you can see right there how one of the teeth on the chronograph driving wheel got gouged. Not something you can see with the naked eye, but with magnification, you find it. Remember that awesome Gautier Prestige Heure Minute? Get close enough and scratches from tools are actually visible on the base plate perlage, which is otherwise gorgeous, evenly spaced, and quite symmetrical. Search longer and you'll find that the engraver overshot his trace lines when numbering this example, and you can find several instances of this. Look at the balance wheel right next to it to get an idea of the magnification. This is looking really close. A Lange und Söhne likely offers the best finish of any watch brand, making more than a few hundred units per year. Lange's double split has a steel chronograph clutch with sharp inward beveled angles and sharp outward points. Look at that. They did inward angles and outward points in incredibly confined spaces on a monoblock steel clutch. That is state of the art. That's as good as it gets. But only millimeters away, oxide escaped the watchmaker's eye back in Germany. This area looks catastrophic right here with a little bit of rust on the spring and the screw, but the whole area is about 3 millimeters in diameter. It's actually smaller than an apple seed, and it escapes the naked eye. These are the things you find if you're me and you're getting super close with a watchmaker's view to parts, finish, condition, and acceptability, rather than the arm's length view that you often see in studio photos online or in sales photos online. Now let's examine a few examples of what I consider to be the best finish I've ever encountered. I thought I would use Grubel Forsey for this, but sometimes the best shows up in unexpected places. Starting with that Minerva built Mont Blanc, 1858. I haven't seen a Longuntina Albert in years, and I don't have the photos to document the experience. So this is going to be my example, and this is a shot of the broad movement. Taking a look, it's blindingly brilliant. This is French-Swiss watchmaking at its finest. Minerva's signature arrow logo is incorporated into a steel chronograph lever with micro bevels. And look at that, interior angles on a component the size of a poppy seed. The bevels are even too, which is not easy to do, with 3 outward points and 2 inward angles. The crown wheel includes rare micro-beveled teeth. This takes forever to execute. This is Voutilanen level stuff on a watch you can buy for a fraction of its original retail price. You can also see how beautifully solarized both the crown wheel, which is outer, and the crown wheel core, which is inner. Solarization on both, and it's symmetrical. The chronograph bridge is world-class and incorporates several inward angles, beautiful stripes on top, and take a look at how broad those bevels are. That's the real thing. Filed and finished by hand with golden chaton cups for the chronograph wheels. The column wheel assembly is spotless. Any spots you see here are on the outside of the sapphire caseback. Perfectly decorated, black polished, micro beveled, and literally as good as it gets. This is exemplary. Patek and Lange should take note. Even the mostly hidden bridge for the escapement below the balance and the hairspring has been intricately detailed. Or consider screws. Most watch brands, as with this Moser, do polish screw heads when you're paying more than $10,000. But chamfering their circumference and slotting them with an internal chamfer takes a lot of time. It gives you a better screwdriver grip when servicing the piece, but there simply isn't time to do this with an enamel dial, a tantalum case, and a perpetual calendar, so the screw is polished but not chamfered. Lange shows how a beveled and slotted screw should be profiled. Look at that inward V, so you can see the slot, but also that the inside edges of the screw have been angled inward. That's to better help the watchmaker find the slot with less risk of slipping and scratching the screw. You can also see that Girard-Perregaux, we're going to come back to this, launched its triaxial tourbillon in 2014, and this is a 5-piece white gold limited edition from next year, 2015. It has the best finished wheels I've ever seen, but we're going to start at the bottom. This Journe has a perfunctory mechanical bevel within its train wheels. You can see it's rough and uneven. Over the spokes, the bevel is of uneven width. And again, it's there. I give them credit for checking the box, but it's not artisanal. Patek 2 is mostly at this level with the 5326G. It's a little cleaner and a little bit more detailed than on the Journe. Laurent Ferrier with the Gallet Micro Rotor has a cleaner execution still, and you can see that there's a bit of polish now for refinement inside of these chamfers. They're not just chamfered and filed, they're actually polished, they gleam. You need more magnification to see it well, but it's there. They are shiny and mirrored. GP takes no prisoners and embarrasses the competition with its triaxial tourbillon caliber 9300. This is the best wheel finish I've ever seen, and this is why I didn't bother including a Grubel 4C. These are rose gold bridges and wheels. Satinated on the flats, mirror beveled internally. Each wheel contains 20 interior angles, and they're all sharp. Wheels like this annihilate pretenders and put the industry on notice that the standard to be called the best is sky high. I'm not saying this is categorically the best ever, only that I've never had a chance to examine better examples in person and with magnifying optics like this. This is Girard-Perregaux at the highest level. If you're getting the Golden Bridge Tourbillon, La Esmeralda, the triple axis tourbillon, you're getting this. Girard-Perregaux has a pretty sweet tourbillon cage for that triple axis tourbillon. A 30-second axis, a 60-second axis, a 120-second axis, effectively a 3-axis flying tourbillon made of steel. Finishing of the micromechanical parts was surgical and manual in the best traditions. And you can see how everything in profile looks like a mirror. And these pieces are the size of eyelashes. The train underpinning the tourbillon includes all of the elements we discussed today: beveling, interior angles, outward points, black polish, satination, slotted screws. It all comes together on this watch. All right, guys, wrist shots number 4. Aaron W. and his Casio G-Shock DW 5600 set sail off the coast of Greece. David W. is a colorful character with his G-Shock Casio and Vespa LX 150. George M. of New England features a Watches Tonight favorite here with the Mito Ocean Star chronometer. Reg V of Long Island heads to LA with his watch box bought Parmigiani Tanda Hemisphere, the perfect travel watch for traveling, and thank you for trusting our company. And Quentin B sends us home with Rolex Omega Beavis and Butthead. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Thanks to you, Time Out Tim Out, and thanks for logging on.